It's not hard for us to get into places where it's difficult to receive anything good, where good things are going on all around us, and we know that with our heads, but somehow we just can't receive it where it counts, where it affects our moods, our emotions, our general outlook on life. And Jesus talked about this to some degree. He talked about different attitudes and different ways of being that kept people from receiving the gospel. And the way he talked about it was with soil. That some soil was rocky, some was like the path. There were just different kinds of soil, and some would receive the gospel, the good news, and some would not. And I think today maybe one of the hardest things that we have in our lives, the way that we deal with the rough soil the most, is a kind of soil of cynicism and bitterness and ingratitude for what's going on in our lives. And we may even know that this is going on and not have much of a way to do anything about it. And a few years back, I saw a documentary that made this story of Jesus's and the way that we experience good news in our lives come to life for me. It was a story that took place bordering the Sahara Desert. It was in a place called Burkina Faso, and in this place, it had been a forest, it had been lush, it had grown good crops, but in the 70s and 80s, some droughts came in, and the land was no longer producing the same things that it had produced before. And people added to this by cutting down trees, and they stripped the land, and so before long, the soil wouldn't hold much water. It was as hard as concrete during the dry season. And so most people fled. Most people went and lived somewhere else. There were some people who were able to stay there. And one person in particular, a farmer, he decided that he was going to work the land during the dry season. And this got the responses that maybe you would expect to get. Everybody around him started calling him an idiot. They called him the village fool, and he just kept on working. And he started doing some things that nobody else was doing. And I watched this and I wonder where he got this inspiration from, because it's amazing what he did. He began to dig small holes in the ground during the dry season. And in these holes, he'd place different organic material, whether it was dung or dried leaves, whatever. But the idea was that when the rain did come, usually the rain just shed off the surface of the water and went somewhere else, and the soil had no chance to soak it in. But with these little pockets, it began to change. And what he also did, and this was the part that was brilliant, was he took termites and he encouraged them to get into the soil. He fed them as he could with this organic material. And what the termites did is they served as a natural irrigation system. And what they did was they burrowed tunnels throughout all the land. So when it did rain, he had the water go into these termite tunnels. He had the water go into these holes, and it was soaked in. It didn't run off. He built walls so that it wouldn't run off of his property. He was able, because it did have this water, to plant trees. And over time, 30, 40 years, what had been a desert turned into 30 acres of forest, and the whole area was changed completely. And it all started by digging these small little holes in this place where there seemed like there was no hope for anything good to grow, but it did through this man's efforts. And it also made me want to do some investigation about some things that I'd heard in the past to see what the research said. There's a doctor named Rick Hansen who is all about positive psychology, and he has a paper, and it's called Positive Emotions and Taking in the Good. And in a very real sense, he's talking about our emotional state, our mental state, our spiritual state being very similar to this desert, and being able to use strategies to take ourselves from that desert place into a place that is lush and green. And the challenge, as he he puts it would be that, this desert land, it's easy to cut down trees. It's easy to keep the water from soaking in the ground when you're on the edge of the Sahara Desert. And I think in our lives today, we definitely are. We're bombarded with negative things, whether it's in the news or what's happening on the other side of the world. We're probably going to hear about it because the saying is true, if it bleeds, it leads. So we have all this stuff coming at us. It's as if we're on the edge of the desert and it's trying to take the good that we have and take it away. But what he says is that even though it is easy for these negative things to affect our outlook, the way he describes it is that we are made up of our memories. The things that have happened to the past give us the ability to receive or reject those things that come to us in the future. So if we've had lots of bad things happen to us, then it's going to be easier for us to focus on the bad. It's going to be easier for us to receive the bad. It actually shrinks the part of our brain that is able to take in good memories. And what's true, and I think you know this from personal experience, I know it for myself, but we can change our outlook in a negative way like that. If something bad happens to us, it can ruin our whole day. If somebody cuts us off in traffic, we can think about if we have a rude encounter with a cashier, it can ruin our whole day. But if somebody does something nice for us, it just slides right off us. And what he proposes for us is that we take moments to do the same thing that this farmer on the edge of the Sahara Desert did and cultivate that water, that good stuff that is coming our way, to actually sit and think about how it makes us feel, to think about how good it is, to think about the way it affects us and our families, our lives, and how it's a really amazing thing that we can have coffee every day, that we have air conditioning, that we have good interactions with our kids, that we have good interactions with our spouses, because so many people don't have these things. And to make these experiences sink in to who we are, and if we can do this and dig these holes and put that organic matter in it, as this farmer, who I have his name here, Yakuba Suadogo, if we do it the way he did, then we can begin to turn what was once a desert into a forest, if we're willing to put in the work and begin to take those small steps and do the work when everybody else is going to be laughing at us.